Buying an old abandoned car factory at 34 years old understandably gets you a lot of questions on a daily basis. So I'm going to answer all of your 8 most frequently asked questions right here, once and for all. Questions like, how do you buy your own car factory? What are you going to make there? And where do you get all of your piles of money from? And how is it your dad? Spoiler, it's not. I want to be as transparent as possible so you might learn something from my journey and, more importantly, what not to do. Let's get started. How did you buy a car factory? To be honest, you buy a car factory the way that you buy a house. This thing had a for sale sign on it. I came to see a building around the corner, this old Heinz building that was this massive building for $200,000. This place was awesome, but also super destroyed. When I got led inside of it by this crazy realtor guy wearing khaki shorts, we were walking on planks of wood above all of this rubble and garbage. Like stuff had been stored there for a decade, marble slabs and old backhoes and stuff. Part of the roof was caving in. This place was in horrible shape, but it was $200,000. Once I toured there, I realized that wasn't really going to be the place for us because I needed somewhere that we could buy and move into almost right away. And so as I was leaving that building, I pulled around the side here and I saw this for sale sign on the front of this building, the building that I'm in now, the car factory. I had my broker call that broker, and it turns out they were friends, and we started to work out the deal. It took almost a year, though, to finally get the keys to this place after seeing it for the first time, because there was the first visit, the second visit, the inspection, the environmental inspection, and then a bunch of paperwork. And I actually had some doubts if I even wanted the place, so I delayed for a little while. But eventually, February 2021, I had the keys to the building and was the buyer. The slowest part by far, though, was the environmental inspection, because these old industrial buildings, they can be really toxic sometimes, and you want to know how toxic they are. Thankfully, this place was never used for toxic production. We went through the phase 1 environmental, which is just a paperwork search, and every one of these industrial buildings always fails the phase 1 because they're potentially toxic. And then the phase 2 is where they come and they actually measure stuff. So they drilled into the concrete, they took core samples, they measure what kind of contaminants are in there. But the big problem came up that there was a record downtown that there was a huge oil tank out front, like a massive tank in the parking lot. So we had to pay for a ground penetrating radar, which sounds way cooler than it looks. It was like this device strung under a baby stroller that they walked laps in the parking lot, and they found eventually that the tank wasn't there. It was removed. And so we got cleared for the environmental phase 2, cleared to buy the building. All the paperwork is just like buying a house, just all the numbers are bigger. Side note, the seller also pulled out a bunch of copper wire from the building to like scrap it or something after I inspected the building, but before I took keys to it, before I took possession. So if you're buying a place like this, make sure that doesn't happen to you, because it's probably about $80,000 worth of damage. Question number 2, do you ever finish a project? Yes. Mostly. You've probably seen projects like the Battlegate and the truck and stuff like that have taken a really long time because they're big projects. But my main thing is the Detroit Bus Company. It's a social benefit bus company that I started 13 years ago. And I don't know why I don't talk about it that much on here, but this takes up a lot of my time. It's a social benefit bus company, which means that we get kids rides to school who otherwise wouldn't get rides. So in Detroit, if you're older than 8th grade, you don't get a ride to school at all. So kids just stop going. So I have this whole fleet of school buses, and we take kids from their school to home, and sometimes to after school programs. It's a whole thing. It's a lot operationally. And so a lot of these projects kind of get put on the back burner when the bus company needs more of me. I don't know why I don't talk about it that much on here. It's like, I think I don't want to like self-aggrandize or something, but that is a huge time commitment. I've tried getting a bunch of volunteers in here to help with car projects and building projects and stuff, and that worked a little bit, but usually when people come by, they kind of get the deal and they don't come back. I also got 2 crazy stalkers out of it, which sounds dramatic, but it's true. And so I'm kind of gun shy on asking any new people to come here. I probably need to get some full-time employees. I think that's the answer, is to find some money and hire some people, really. We do have a small team of volunteers, though, that comes by once a week, and they help out on some things, which is a huge help. It's about a half dozen guys, and they've been very consistent over the few years. I wouldn't have been able to get anything done without them. So thank you. The point is, the work here is physically gigantic, and I expect 2026 to go a lot better with the projects, with the Senpai and the open source truck and all of those things. I'm very optimistic, and that's a core character trait of mine. Question number 3, will the Battlegate ever be done? Yes. The Battlegate is almost done. If you don't know what the Battlegate is, I'll tell you. We had a string of break-ins. Some guys broke in and stole all of our catalytic converters and some batteries and really caused a lot of damage to the bus fleet. And then someone tried to back their van through our gate and destroyed the main gate in the process, which is this big 26-foot wide gate. And it took the damage, but it destroyed the gate in the process. So I said, I'm going to build this awesome, huge Battlegate, which began this massive project to build a 40-foot long, 8-foot tall super gate. People donated all of this material and supplies and all this stuff to build this gate, and we fabricated the gate itself. It's sitting in the building next to me. It's like waiting to be installed. But we're stuck on this last part, which is how do we make this super heavy, super massive gate move affordably? I found some gate tracks that are like $4 or $5 grand, $6 grand, and I'm just like hesitant to spend the money on that. I wanted to find some kind of a cheaper wheel system that I can use for this that's consistent. The problem is the buses come and go all day and night, and so the gate needs to be super reliable and consistent. We fixed the old gate temporarily, and it kind of works, but I really need a good system to move this gate around, and I just keep putting it off week after week. And then the ground froze, so we can't put the posts in to hang the gate, so it's kind of frozen, pun intended, until springtime. So there it sits in the middle of the shop. Literally in the most valuable part of the shop, right in the center of the fabrication area, is the Battlegate. That's on me. Question 4, do you have daddy's money? No. My parents didn't have a lot of money growing up. My mom was a cashier at Kmart. She ran the cash register out by the landscaping area. My dad was a janitor at this restaurant chain called Big Boy. And we lived in one bedroom in my grandparents' house. Me, my mom, dad, and my little brother all in one little pink bedroom. We had the bed stacked like Tetris blocks. And I think we lived there till I was 8. Now, we were never uncomfortable. Like, we always had food and everything, and my grandpa worked at Detroit Diesel and payroll, and my grandma was a secretary at GM. I come from a long line of automaker family history. My grandpa's brother worked in the Packard Plant, putting every horn in every 53 Packard. Like, we had your typical comfortable suburban life here. It was fine. But there's no big pile of money that made this all happen. The way that I got to where I am now is very, very slowly and over a super long period of time. Remember, the bus company is 13 years old. I got my first break by flipping cars when I was 16. My friend bid for me because I wasn't 18. You have to be 18 to buy auction cars. And I bought these gross old cars for $200, $300. And I learned how to fix them. So I learned how to fix them up and clean them out and make sure everything was right. And sold them on Craigslist. And this was like my first little like nest egg. I worked as a busboy bussing tables, and I made $4.25 an hour. I did one of these car flips, and I compared it to what I was making as a busboy. And I was like, there's no comparison. Like, being an entrepreneur or like doing the business thing is way, way, way better. And so I got a small little shop space to do that more. I probably only did like a dozen cars before I got into equipment. So I learned that like equipment was way less picky, way less difficult at doing things like environmental chambers and restaurant equipment and things that have like intrinsic value, meaning like they're always worth something no matter how old they are. People are really sensitive to the condition of a car. Like, they're very sensitive to how many miles it has on it and what kind of shape it's in and how well it runs, whereas like a meat slicer either works or it doesn't. And so I found dealing in equipment was a lot easier. Then I got my big break when I did the Farmer Jack liquidation. I got connected to the guy who owned this warehouse that had all this stuff from a grocery store chain called Farmer Jack that was here. And it was 1 million square feet of meat slicers and rotisseries and pallet racking and forklifts and all this stuff. And I helped this guy sell these things one by one, and I got a small fraction of it. I got a third of everything that I sold. And that really gave me like my first jump ahead. I got to do this in bulk. And I think it's just because I was available and ready and said, yes, let's do it. I think that was the inflection point where I was able to build a scalable business where I wasn't just doing one piece of equipment or one car at a time. I also hired my first employees then, and I was able to like pay people, which started as just my friends were my employees, and then got employees and grew it from there. That's really, though, I think where everything started. And then it was actually the buying and selling of equipment that got me into starting the bus company, because a local school system was selling 3 buses, and I helped them sell those buses for a small cut, and I decided to buy one of them. I was really frustrated by how bad public transit was here. Like, I'd been in other cities where public transit is awesome, and in Detroit, public transit is really, really bad. And so I bought this bus as like a protest piece, and I ran it up and down Woodward Avenue. It was $5 to ride all day, and it was a terrible business model. In short, when you pay the city bus to ride the city bus, your $2 goes like 5% towards what it costs to give you that ride. The other 95% comes from the city or the state or the Fed. I didn't know any of that. I just thought I'd just try harder. So then after I had that first bus, people started calling me asking if they could rent it because they saw me on the news with my bus line. And so then we started renting out the first bus for weddings and birthday parties, and then doing school field trips and school transportation during the week. And then we got a second bus and a third bus and a fourth bus and just grew it from there. I don't have any investors or partners or anything. I still say we because it's all of the teammates who make this thing happen. Like, I can't drive and fix and book all of the buses. Like, it needs to be all of us doing that. So I just say we, but no investors, or it's just me. So it grew very slowly over time. Over the course of a decade, I would save $600, $700 a month into an account, and then I used that as a nest egg to go and then buy our own building because I was tired of leasing something and moving all the time, but I knew that I needed a down payment to get a place. Financially, it would have made sense to buy a smaller, simpler, newer building than this one, but I believe in places like this. I just wanted to save one of these old factories. I watched things like the Packard Plant crumble, and I wanted to have one of my own to bring back. Question number 6. Did you encounter a Siberian tiger in the abandoned Packard plant? Yes. Google it. You wouldn't believe me anyway, so Google it. Question number 7, what are your expenses at the factory? The mortgage here is about $5,300 a month. It's a 10-year AM, which means that in 10 years, I will fully own the place. The utilities are about $1,800 a month, but that's split across the whole year. Our electric bill in the summer is almost nothing, and then our heating bill in the winter is like $6,000 or $7,000 a month. And so if you average that all out, it becomes $1,800 a month across the year. My insurance payment is about $2,400 a month, and this insures against fire and loss here. If this had a fire suppression system or was in better condition, the insurance rate would be less, but insurance is just going to be expensive. I have to pay a fee here called drainage, which is $1,800 a month for kind of nothing. It's based on the size of your building, and some cities do this where they have flooding or drainage problems, and so they measure the size of your building with a drone or a satellite image, and then they tax you based on that amount. We pay $1,800 a month to the water authority. Apparently, though, if we were to route all of our drain pipes to the parking lot and build like a moat outside that equaled the amount of water that comes in a month, then we wouldn't have to pay that fee. So maybe after the Battlegate, I'll build a moat, and then we'll be most of the way towards a castle. Taxes here are about $24,000 a year. They were like $2,000 a year because the building had been owned by the same people for 50 years. But when I bought it, they did what's called an uncapping. So when a building changes owners, they uncap the taxes so they can leap up to the current tax rate for what it's worth. $24,000 a year doesn't seem that bad, though. I think people pay that for like a big, nice house somewhere. And this is a factory the size of a Walmart. Question number 8, what are you going to make at the factory? In short, a small truck. So think like an American K-truck. This isn't the kind of truck you're going to want to drive for like 3 hours on the freeway or haul 10,000 pounds with, but it'll be the perfect truck for small cities and urban environments, or if you own some land. Like, it'll be the perfect thing if you have like a back 40 you got to go bring the grandkids out on. This is going to be something customizable and modular and really easy to work on, which is not what current trucks and side-by-sides are. We're sort of making a new category that the US really hasn't had yet, which is very popular in Japan and Korea and China, which is these K-sized vehicles. You'll see more of it soon, but think small. The idea is to make something tough and affordable like the Model T used to be. The Model T was just 2 frame rails with an engine and a seat. Very, very, very simple vehicles. But they gave people mobility that otherwise couldn't afford it. That was the whole point of the thing. I think we've gotten so far away from that I want to get back to that with this thing. Who knows? This might be a completely terrible idea like my original bus route line where it was $5 to ride all day and it lost a ton of money that I didn't have. It might turn out that way, but I have to try. I got to try. It's been long enough, and I've told you about my little truck for so long. Question number 9, how much did you pay for the car factory? This is probably the question that I get the most, and understandably, like it could be $1 like Bart Simpson, or it could be $5 million. It's somewhere in the middle. A lot of people don't share these kind of things, but I want to be open about this stuff so that you might get some idea of scale for this, and you might be able to buy your own car factory. So the factory cost me $700,000, which I didn't have to pay all at once. I paid a $200,000 down payment, and then the $500,000 was financed over 10 years. So it's like a mortgage. But it's called a land contract because the seller financed it. So the seller took the $200,000 as the down payment, and then they get payments every single month like they're a bank. It's a 10-year AM, which means it's paid over 10 years, but they get what's called a 5-year balloon. So in February, which will be 5 years I've owned the car factory, they get the payout for the rest of the owed, and then the financing will go to a bank or something. Land contracts work really well because a lot of banks don't want to finance somebody who's a 34-year-old guy buying an abandoned car factory on the west side of Detroit. They want safe bets. They want big, safe, new things. And so if the seller takes some of that risk, then the bank can take the back half of it when it's almost all the way paid off. I also can't believe that it's almost been 5 years that I've owned the car factory, and I've been making content here for 4 of them. So that's it. Those are my 9 most asked questions. So when someone asks one, please link them to this, and we'll get back to fixing up this car factory. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you clicked the thing or not. Bye.